trees too, now and then leaning together to talk, though nobody was close enough to hear anything they said. "Looks like your visitors are more than casual," Elias said quietly. "Watch Galien. He could be trouble." "You know him, Elias?" "I'd like you to stay, but if you think he might tell one of the sisters who you are..." Perrin shrugged in resignation. "I might be able to stop Sione Don Missouri." He thought he could. "But I think Anura will do whatever she wants." And what did she really think about Massima? "Oh, Bertin Galien doesn't know the likes of Elias Machera," Elias replied with a wry grin. "More fools know Jack Fool than Jack Fool knows. I know him, though. He won't go against you or behind your back, but Berlain has the brains between them. She's kept Tyr out of Mayenne by playing the tyrants against the Ilianers since she was 16. Berlain knows how to maneuver. All Galien knows is attack. He's good at it, but he never sees anything else, and sometimes he doesn't stop to think." "I'd figured that out about both of them," Perrin muttered. At least Berlain had brought a messenger from Alejandra. She would not have come rushing in that way with a new maid. The only question was why Alejandra's reply needed a messenger. "I had best find out whether the news is good, Elias. Later we'll talk about what lies south. And you can meet Fail," he added before turning away. "The pit of doom lies south," the other man called after him. "Or as close to it as I expected to see below the Blight." Perrin imagined he heard that faint thunder in the west again. Now that would be a pleasant change. In the tent, Brianna was carrying a silver tray about with a bowl of rose-scented water and cloths for washing faces and hands, curtsying stiffly as she presented it. With even stiffer curtsies, Megden was offering a tray holding cups of wine punch, made with the last of the dried blueberries by the smell, while Linny folded the newcomer's dust cloak. There seemed something odd in the way Fail and Berlain stood to either side of the new woman, and Anura hovered behind them, all focused on her. Somewhere in her middle years, with a cap of green net gathering dark hair that fell almost to her waist, she might have been pretty if her nose had not been so long. And if she had not carried it so high. Shorter than Fail or Berlain, either one, she still managed to look down that nose at Perrin, coolly examining him from hair to boots. She did not blink at sight of his eyes, although nearly everyone did. "Majesty," Berlain pronounced in a formal voice as soon as Perrin entered. "May I present Lord Perrin Ibarra of the Two Rivers, in Andor, the personal friend and emissary of the Dragon Reborn." The long-nosed woman nodded carefully, coolly, and Berlain went on with scarcely a pause. "Lord Ibarra, give greetings and welcome to Alejandra Maritha Kagarin, Queen of Gildan, Blessed of the Light, Defender of Garen's Wall, who is pleased to receive you in person." Galien, standing near the tent wall, adjusted his eye patch and raised his wine cup to Perrin with a smile of triumph. For some reason, Fail shot Berlain a hard look. Perrin's mouth nearly dropped open. Alejandra herself? He wondered whether he should kneel, then settled for a bow after too long a pause. Light. He had no notion how to deal with a queen, especially one who turned up out of the blue with no escort, without a jewel in sight. Her dark green riding dress was plain wool, lacking a single stitch of embroidery. "After the recent news," Alejandra said, "I thought I should come to you, Lord Ibarra." Her voice was calm, her face smooth, her eyes aloof, and observant, or he was a Taran ferryman. Best to step warily till he knew how the path lay. "You may not have heard," she continued, "but 4 days ago Ilion fell to the Dragon Reborn. Blessed be his name in the light. He has taken the laurel crown, though I understand it is now called the Crown of Swords." Fail, taking a cup from Megden's tray, whispered under her breath, "And 7 days ago the Shanshan took Abu Dar." Even Megden did not notice. If Perrin had not already taken hold of himself, he truly would have gaped. Why did Fail tell him this way instead of waiting for it to come from the woman who must have told her? In a voice that everyone could hear, he repeated her words. A hard voice, but that was the only way to keep it from shaking. Abu Dar, too. Light. And 7 days ago? The day Grady and the others had seen the one power in the sky. Coincidence, maybe? But would he rather it had been the Forsaken? Anura frowned over her cup, pursing her lips, before he finished speaking, and Berlin gave him a startled look that vanished quickly. They knew he had not known about Abu Dar when they rode into Bethel. Alejandra merely nodded, every bit as self-possessed as the gray. "You seem remarkably well informed," she said, coming closer to him. "I doubt the first rumors are reaching Johanna with the river trade yet. I myself learned of it only a few days ago. Several of the merchants keep me abreast of events. I believe," she added dryly, "that they hope I can intercede for them with the prophet of the Lord Dragon, if such becomes necessary." At last he could pick out her scent, and his opinion of her changed, though not for the worse. Outwardly, the queen was all cool reserve, but uncertainty shot through with fear filled the smell of her. He did not believe he could have held his face so calm had he felt that. "Always best to know as much as you can," he told her, half distracted. "Burn me," he thought. "I have to let Rand know about this." "In Saldea, we find merchants useful for information, too," Fail said, implying that was how Perrin knew about Abu Dar. "They seem to learn what happened 1,000 miles off weeks before the rumors begin." She did not look at Perrin, but he knew she spoke to him as much as Alejandra. Rand knew, she was saying. And anyway, there was no way to get word to him in secret. Could Fail really want him to? No, it was unthinkable. Blinking, he realized he had missed something Alejandra had said. "Your pardon, Alejandra," he said politely. "I was thinking about Rand, the Dragon Reborn." Of course it was unthinkable. Everyone stared at him, even Linny and Megden and Brianna. Anura's eyes had gone wide, and Gallienne's mouth hung open. Then it hit him. He had just called the Queen by name. He took a cup from Megden's tray, and she rose from her curtsy so quickly that she nearly knocked it from his hand. Waving her absently away, he wiped his damp hand on his coat. He had to concentrate here, not let his mind wander in 9 directions. No matter what Elias thought he knew, Fail would never... No! Concentrate! Alejandra recovered her equilibrium quickly. In truth, she had appeared the least surprised of anyone, and her scent never wavered. "I was saying that coming to you in secret seemed the wisest course, Lord Ibarra," she said in that cool voice. "Lord Telebin believes I am keeping private in his gardens, which I left by a seldom-used gate. Passing out of the city, I was Anura Sadai's maid." Brushing fingertips across one skirt of her riding dress, she gave a small laugh. Even that about her was cool, so at odds with what his nose told him. "A number of my own soldiers saw me, but with the hood of my cloak pulled up, none knew me." "Times being what they are, that was probably wisest," Perrin said carefully. "But you will have to come into the open sooner or later, one way or another." Light and to the point, that was the thing. A queen would not want to waste time with a man who blathered, and he did not want to disappoint Fail by acting the hayfoot again. "Why come at all? All you had to do was send a letter or just tell Berylane your answer. Will you declare for Rand or not? Either way, have no fear about getting back to Bethel safely." A good point, that. Whatever else frightened her, being here alone must. Fail was watching him, pretending not to, sipping her punch and directing her smiles at Alejandra, but he caught the quick flickers of her eyes in his direction.
Hell yeah, fire.
Berling made no pretense, watching quite openly, eyes slightly narrowed and never leaving his face. Anura was just as intent, just as thoughtful. Did they all believe he was going to trip over his own tongue again? Instead of answering the important question, Alejandra said, "The first told me a great deal about you, Lord Ibarra, and about the Lord Dragon Reborn, blessed be his name in the light." That last sounded by rote, an addition she no longer had to think about. I cannot see him before I make my decision, so I wish to see you, to take a measure of you. It's possible to tell much about a man by those he chooses to speak for him. Tilting her face down toward the cup in her hands, she peered at him through her lashes. From Berlin, that would have been flirtatious, but Alejandra was cautiously watching a wolf, sure as he was standing in front of her. I also saw your banners, she said quietly. The first did not mention them. Perrin scowled before he could stop himself. Berlin had told her a great deal about him? What had she said? The banners are meant to be seen. Anger put a roughness in his voice that required some effort to force down. Now, Berlin was a woman who needed shouting at. Believe me, there are no plans to set up Manetheren again. There. His tone was as cool as Aleandra's. What is your decision? Rand can have 10,000 soldiers, 100,000, here in the blink of an eye, or near enough. And he might have to. The Seanchan and Amador and Abu Dar? Light, how many were they? Aleandra sipped delicately at her wine punch before speaking, and again she dodged the question. There are 1,000 rumors, as you must know, and even the wildest is believable when the dragon is reborn. Strangers appear claiming to be Arthur Hawkwing's armies returned, and the tower itself is broken by rebellion. A matter for Aes Sedai, Anura said sharply. It concerns no one else. Berlin flashed an exasperated look at her, which she affected not to notice. Aleandra flinched and turned her shoulder to the sister. Queen or not, no one wanted to hear that tone from an Aes Sedai. The world is turned upside down, Lord Ebara. Why, I've even had reports of Aiel sacking a village right here in Gillidan. Abruptly, Perrin realized there was more here than anxiety over offending Aes Sedai. Aleandra watched him, waiting. But for what? Reassurance? The only Aiel in Gillidan are with me, he told her. The Seanchan may be descendants of Arthur Hawkwing's army, but Hawkwing is 1,000 years dead. Rand dealt with them once already, and he will again. He remembered Falma as clearly as Dumais Wells, though he had tried forgetting. Surely there had not been enough of them there to take Amador and Abu Dar, even with their Damane. Bulwer claimed they had Terabana soldiers too. And it might cheer you to hear that those rebel Aes Sedai support Rand. They will soon, at least. That was what Rand said. A handful of Aes Sedai with nowhere to go except to him. Perrin was not so sure. Rumor in Gildan put an army with those sisters. Of course, the same rumors counted more Aes Sedai in that handful than there were in the world. But still, Light, he wished someone would reassure him. Why don't we sit, he said. I'll answer any questions you have to help you make your decision, but we might as well be comfortable. Drawing one of the folding chairs to him, he remembered at the last instant not to just drop into it, but it creaked under him just the same. Linny and the other two servants rushed about, pulling chairs into a circle with his, but none of the other women moved toward them. Aleandra stood looking at him, and the rest looked at her, except for Galien, who merely poured himself another cup of punch from the silver pitcher. It came to Perrin that Fail had not opened her mouth since speaking of the merchants. He was as grateful for Berlain's silence as he was that she had not decided to flutter her lashes at him in front of the Queen. But he could have used some help from Fail right then. A little advice. Light, she knew 10 times what he did about what he should say and do here. Wondering whether he should stand with the others, he set down his wine punch on one of the small tables and asked her to speak to Aleandra. If anyone can make her see the right way to go, you can, he said. Fail gave him a pleased smile, but held her tongue. Abruptly, Aleandra put out her cup to one side without looking, as if expecting a tray to be there. One was, barely in time to catch the cup, and Megden, who held it, muttered something Perrin hoped Fail had not heard. Fail was death on servants using that sort of language. He started to rise as Aleandra approached him, but to his shock, she knelt gracefully in front of him, catching his hands with hers. Before he knew what she was doing, she twisted so her hands were back to back between his palms. She clung so hard, her hands must have hurt. For sure, he was not certain he could loose himself without hurting her. "Under the light," she said firmly, looking up at him. "I, Alejandra Maritha Kigaran, pledge my fealty and service to Lord Perrin Ibarra of the Two Rivers, now and for all time, save that he chooses to release me of his own will. My lands and throne are his, and I yield them to his hand. So do I swear." For an instant there was a silence broken only by Gallienne's gasp and the muted thud of his wine cup hitting the rug. Then Perrin heard Fail once more whispering so softly no one next to her could have made out her words. "Under the light, I do accept your pledge and will defend and protect you and yours through battle's rack and winter's blast and all that time may bring. The lands and throne of Gildan I give to you as my faithful vassal. Under the light, I do accept." That must have been the Saldean manner of accepting. Thank the light, she was too busy concentrating on him to see Berlain nodding at him furiously, urging the same. The pair of them looked almost as if they had expected this. Anura, though, with her mouth hanging open, appeared as stunned as he, like a fish who had just seen the water vanish. "Why?" he asked gently, ignoring Fail's frustrated hiss and Berlain's exasperated grunt alike. "Burn me," he thought. "I'm a bloody blacksmith. Nobody swore fealty to blacksmiths. Queens did not swear fealty to anyone." "I've been told I'm ta'veren. You might want to reconsider this in an hour." "I hope you are ta'veren, my lord." Alejandro laughed, but not in amusement, and gripped his hands even more tightly, as though fearful he might pull away. "With all my heart, I hope it. I fear nothing less will save Gildan. I all but reached this decision as soon as the first told me why you are here, and meeting you only confirmed me in it. Gildan needs protection I cannot give, so duty demands I find it. You can give it, my lord. You and the Lord Dragon Reborn, blessed be his name in the light. In truth, I would swear directly to him if he were here, but you are his man. Swearing to you, I also swear to him." Drawing a deep breath, she forced out another word. "Please." She smelled desperate now, and her eyes shone with fear. Still he hesitated. This was everything Rand could want and more. But Perrin Ibarra was just a blacksmith. He was. Could he still tell himself that if he did this thing? Alejandra stared up at him pleadingly. Did ta'veren work on themselves, he wondered. "Under the light, I, Perrin Ibarra, accept your pledge." His throat was dry by the time he finished the words Fail had whispered. Too late to stop and think now. With a gasp of relief, Alejandra kissed his hands. Perrin did not think he had ever been so embarrassed in his life. Standing hurriedly, he drew her to her feet, and realized he did not know what to do next. A proudly beaming Fail whispered no further hints. Berlain smiled, too, relief so strong in her face she might have just been pulled from a fire. He was sure Anura would speak. I said I always had plenty to say, especially when it gave an opportunity to take charge. But the Grey Sister was holding out a wine cup for Megden to refill. Anura watched him with an unreadable expression, and for that matter, so did Megden, so much so that she continued tilting her pitcher until punch slopped over onto the Aes Sedai's wrist. At which Anura gave a start, staring at the cup in her hand as though she had forgotten it was there. Fail frowned, and Linny frowned even harder, and Megden scurried for a cloth to dry the sister's hand, all the while muttering under her breath again. Fail was going to have fits if she ever heard those mutters. Perrin knew he was taking too long. Alejandra licked her lips anxiously. She expected more, but what? "Now that we're done here, I have to find the prophet next," he said, and winced. Too abrupt. He had no feel for dealing with nobles, much less queens. "I suppose you'll want to get back to Bethel before anyone learns you're gone." "The last I heard," Alejandra told him, The prophet of the Lord Dragon was in Avila. That's the largest town in Amadisia, perhaps 40 leagues south of here. In spite of himself, Perrin frowned, though he smoothed his brow quickly. So Bulwer had been right. Right in one thing did not mean right in all, but it might be worthwhile hearing what the man had to say about the White Cloaks and the Shawn-Chan. How many terror bombers? Fail glided to his side, laying a hand on his arm and directing a warm smile at Alejandra. You cannot mean to send her away now, my heart. Not when she has just arrived. Leave us to talk here out of the sun before she must face the ride back. I know you have important matters to see to. He managed not to stare, with a little effort. What could be more important than the Queen of Yeldum? Certain sure, nothing anyone would let him lay hand to. Clearly, she wanted to talk with Alejandro without him. With luck, she would tell him why later. With luck, she would tell him all of it. Elias might think he knew Saldeans, but Perrin had learned on his own that only a fool tried to root out all of his wife's secrets, or let her know about those he had unearthed already. Leaving Alejandra should no doubt involve as much ceremony as meeting her, but he managed a credible leg and made his bow, asking her pardon for going off, and she curtsied deeply, murmuring that he honored her too much, and that was that. Except for jerking his head at Galien to follow him. He doubted that Fail would send him off and want that one to stay. What did she want to talk about alone? Outside, the one-eyed man gave Perrin a clap on the shoulder that would have staggered a smaller man. Burn me. I've never heard of the like. Now I can say I've seen a Taviran at work for true. What did you want with me? And what was he to say to that? Just then he heard shouting from the Mayener camp, the sound of arguing, loud enough that 2 Rivers men stood to peer through the trees, though the side of the hill hid everything. First, let's see what all that is about, Perrin replied. That would give him time to think. About what to say to Galien, and other things.
Fail waited a few moments after Perrin left before telling the servants that she and the others would see to themselves. Megden was so busy staring at Alejandra that Lini had to pluck at her sleeve before she moved. That would have to be handled later. Setting her cup down, Fail followed the 3 women to the door of the tent as if hurrying them, but she paused there. Perrin and Galien were striding off through the trees toward the Mayener camp. Good. Most of Chuff Fail was squatting not far off. Catching Perilian's eye, she gestured low in front of her waist where no one behind her could see. A quick circular motion followed by a clenched fist. Immediately, the Tyrans and Kyrian broke apart in groups of 2 or 3 and spread out. Far less elaborate than maiden-hand talk, Chafail's signals sufficed. In moments, a scattered ring of her people had surrounded the tent, apparently at random, talking idly or playing at cat's cradle, but no one would come nearer than 20 paces without her receiving warning before they reached the threshold. It was Perrin who worried her most. She had expected something momentous as soon as Alejandra appeared in the flesh, if not what came, but he had been stunned by her vow. If he took it into his head to return, to take another stab at making Alejandra feel comfortable in her decision, oh, he did think with his heart when he should use his head, and with his head when he should use his heart. Guilt pricked her at the thought. Peculiar servants you found by the side of the road, Berelaine said in tones of mock sympathy at her side, and Fail gave a start. She had not heard the woman come up behind her. Lini and the others were walking toward the carts, Lini shaking a finger at Megden, and Berelaine shifted her gaze from Fail to them. She kept her voice low, but the mocking tone remained. The oldest, at least, seems to know her duties instead of simply having heard about them, but Anura tells me the youngest is a wilder. Very weak, Anura says. Negligible, but wilders always cause problems. The others will carry tales about her if they know, and sooner or later she will run away. Wilders always do, I hear. That's what comes of picking up your maids like stray dogs. They suit me well enough, Fail replied coolly. Still, a long conversation with Lini was definitely needed. A wilder? Even if weak, that might prove useful. I always thought you were fit for hiring servants. Berelaine blinked, uncertain what that meant, and Fail carefully did not let her satisfaction show. Turning away, she said, Anura, will you make us private with a ward against listeners? There seemed little chance that Cyanid or Masuri would find any opportunity to eavesdrop using the power. She was waiting for the explosion when Perrin found out just how tightly the Wise Ones had that pair haltered. Yet the Wise Ones themselves might have learned. Fail was sure Adara and the others were wringing Cyanid and Masuri dry. The Grey Sister's beaded braids clicked softly as she nodded. It is done, Lady Fail, she said, and Berelaine's lips compressed briefly. Quite satisfying. The temerity of making the presentations here in Fail's own tent. She deserved more than having someone step between her and her advisor, but it was satisfying. Childishly satisfying, Fail admitted, when she should be focused on the matter at hand. She almost bit her lip in aggravation. She did not doubt her husband's love, but she could not treat Berelaine as the woman deserved, and that forced her, against her will, to play a game with Perrin too often as the gaming board, and the prize, so Berelaine believed. If only Perrin did not sometimes behave as if he might be. Firmly, she put all that out of her head. There was a wife's work to be done here, the practical side. Aleandra glanced thoughtfully at Anura when a ward was mentioned. She had to realize it meant serious talk. But what she said was, Your husband is a formidable man, Lady Fail. I mean no offense when I say his bluff exterior belies a shrewd mind. With Amadisia on our doorstep, we in Gildan play Desdemar of necessity, but I do not think I have ever been danced so swiftly or so deftly to a decision as your lord did. The hint of a threat here, a frown there, a very formidable man. This time, hiding her smile took some effort on Fail's part. These Southlanders set a great store by the game of houses, and she did not think Aleandra would appreciate learning that Perrin simply said what he believed, too freely by half at times, and people with devious minds saw calculation in his honesty. He spent some time in Cairn, she said. Let Aleandra make of that what she would. We can speak freely here, safe behind Anura Sedai's warding. It is plain you do not want to return to Bethal yet. Is your oath to Perrin and his to you not enough to tie him to you? Some here in the south had peculiar ideas of what fealty entailed. Berelaine silently took a position to Fail's right, and a moment later Anura did the same on her left, so that Aleandra found herself confronted by all three. It surprised Fail that the Aes Sedai fell in with her plan without knowing what it was. Without doubt, Anura had her own reasons, and Fail would have given a pretty to know what they were. But she felt no surprise that Berelaine did so. One casual mocking sentence could spoil everything, especially about Perrin's skill in the great game, yet she was sure it would not come. In a way, that irritated her. Once she had despised Berelaine. She still hated her, deep and hot, but grudging respect had replaced contempt. The woman knew when their game had to be put aside. If not for Perrin, Fail thought she might actually have liked her. Briefly, to extinguish that hateful thought, she pictured herself shaving Berelaine bald. She was a jade and a troll, and not something Fail could allow to divert her now. Aleandra studied each of the women in front of her in turn, but she gave no evidence of nervousness. Taking up her wine cup again, she sipped casually and spoke with sighs and rueful smiles, as if her words were not really as important as they sounded. I mean to keep my oath, of course, but you must understand that I hoped for more. Once your husband goes, I am left as I was. Worse, perhaps, until some tangible aid comes from the Lord Dragon, blessed be his name in the light. The prophet could ruin Bethal, or even Johanna itself, as he did Samara, and I cannot stop him. and if he somehow learns of my oath. He says he has come to show us how to serve the Lord Dragon in the light, but he is the one who shows that way, and I cannot think he will be pleased with anyone who finds another. It is good that you will keep your oath, Fail told her dryly. If you want more of my husband, perhaps you should do more. Perhaps you should accompany him when he goes south to meet the prophet. Of course, you will want your own soldiers with you, but I suggest no more than the first has with her. Shall we sit? Taking the chair Perrin had vacated, she motioned Berelain and Anora to those on either side, and only then gestured toward another for Aleandra. The queen sat slowly, staring wide-eyed at Fail, not nervous, but astounded. "Why in the light would I do that?" she exclaimed. "Lady Fail, the children of the light will take any excuse to increase their depredations in Gildan, and King Aelron might decide to send an army north as well. It's impossible." "The wife of your liege lord asks it of you, Aleandra," Fail said firmly. It didn't seem possible that Aleandra's eyes could widen further, yet they did. She looked to Anura and found only imperturbable Aes Sedai calm looking back. "Oh, of course," she said after a moment. Her voice was hollow. Swallowing, she added, "Oh, of course I will do as you ask, my lady." Fail hid her relief behind a gracious nod of acceptance. She had expected Aleandra to balk. That Aleandra could swear fealty without realizing what that meant, that she felt it necessary to say that she intended to keep her oath, had only confirmed Fail's belief that the woman could not be left behind. By all accounts, Aleandra had dealt with Massima by yielding to him. Slowly, to be sure, with little other choice and only when she had to, yet submission could become a habit. Back in Bethal, with nothing visible changed, how soon before she would decide to hedge with a warning to Massima? She had felt the weight of her oath. Now Fail could lighten her burden. "I am happy that you will be accompanying us," she said warmly, and truly she was. "My husband does not forget those who render him service. One such service would be to write to your nobles, telling them that a man in the south has raised the banner of Manetheren." Berelain's head half jerked around in surprise, and Anura went so far as to blink. "My lady," Aleandra said urgently, "half of them will send word to the prophet as soon as they receive my letter. They are terrified of him, and the light alone knows what he might do." Just the response Fail had hoped for. "Which is why you will write him also, saying that you have gathered a few soldiers to deal with this man personally. After all, the prophet of the Lord Dragon is too important to have to turn his attention to such a minor matter." "Very good," Anura murmured. "No one will know who is who." Berelain laughed in delighted approval. "Burn her." "My lady," Aleandra breathed, "I said that my Lord Perrin is formidable. May I add that his wife is every bit as formidable?" Fail tried not to bask too visibly. Now she had to send word to her people in Bethel. In a way, she regretted that. Explaining to Perrin would have been more than difficult, but even he could not have kept his temper if she had kidnapped the Queen of Gildan.
Most of the winged guards appeared to be gathered on the edge of their camp, surrounding 10 of their number on horseback. The absence of lances said the riders were scouts. The men afoot milled and pushed, trying to get closer. Perrin thought he heard thunder again, not so distant, but it only touched the edge of awareness. As he prepared to push his way through, Galien roared, "Make way, you mangy hounds!" Heads whipped around, and men wriggled sideways in the mass, opening a narrow path. Perrin wondered what would happen if he called the Two Rivers men mangy hounds. Probably earn him a punch in the nose. It might be worth a try. Narella and the other officers were with the scouts. So were 7 men afoot with their hands tied behind them and lead ropes around their necks, all shuffling their feet and hunching their shoulders and scowling defiance or fear or both. Their clothes were stiff with old filth, though some had been fine once. Strangely, they smelled heavily of wood smoke. For that matter, some of the mounted soldiers had soot on their faces, and 1 or 2 seemed to be nursing burns. Aram stood studying the prisoners, frowning slightly. Galien took a stance with his feet apart and fists on his hips, his one eye doing as good a job of glaring as most men's two. "What happened?" he demanded. "My scouts are supposed to bring back information, not rag pickers." "I will let Ortiz report, my lord," Norella said. "He was there. Squadron Ortiz." A soldier in his middle years scrambled down from his saddle to bow, gauntleted hand pressed to heart. His helmet was plain, without the thin plumes and wings that were worked in the sides of officers' helmets. Beneath the rim, a livid burn stood out plainly on his face. The other cheek had a scar that pulled up the corner of his mouth. "My lord Galien, my lord Ibarra," he said in a gravelly voice. "We came on these turnip eaters about 2 leagues to the west, my lords, burning a farm with the farm folk inside. A woman tried to get out a window and one of these scum bashed her head in. Knowing how Lord Ibarra feels, we put a stop to it. We were too late to save anybody, but we caught these 7. The rest got away." "People are often tempted to slide back into the shadow," one of the prisoners said suddenly. "They must be reminded of the cost." A tall, lean man with a stately air, his voice was smooth and educated, but his coat was as dirty as any of the others, and he had not shaved in 2 or 3 days. Prophet did not seem to approve of wasting time on things like razors. Or washing. With his hands bound and a rope around his neck, he glared at his captors without the least bit of fear. He was all supercilious defiance. "Your soldiers do not impress me," he said. "The prophet of the Lord Dragon, blessed be his name in the light, has destroyed greater armies by far than your tag end. You may kill us, but we will be avenged when the prophet spills your blood on the ground. None of you will survive us long. He will triumph in fire and in blood." He finished on a ringing tone, his back straight as an iron rod. Murmurs ran through the listening soldiers. They knew very well that Massima had destroyed larger armies than theirs. "Hang them," Perrin said. Again he heard that thunder. Having given the order, he made himself watch. Despite the murmurs, there was no lack of ready hands. Some of the prisoners began to weep as their lead ropes were thrown over tree limbs. A once fat man, whose wattles hung in folds, shouted that he repented, that he would serve any master they named. A bald-headed fellow, who looked as tough as Lamgwin, thrashed and screamed until the rope cut off his howls. Only the smooth-voiced man did not kick or fight, even when the noose drew tight on his neck. To the end, he glared defiance. "At least one of them knew how to die," Galien growled, as the last body went limp. He frowned at the men decorating the trees, as if regretting they had not put up more fight.
Number 2 down.
"If those people were serving the shadow," Aram began, then hesitated. "Forgive me, Lord Perrin, but will the Lord Dragon approve of this?" Perrin gave a start and stared at him, aghast. "Light, Aram. You heard what they did. Rand would have put ropes on their necks himself." He thought Rand would have. Hoped he would have. Rand was fixed on welding the nations together before the last battle, and he had done little counting of cost to do so. Men's heads jerked up as thunder pealed loud enough for all to hear, then closer, and again closer still. A wind gusted, fell, rose again, tugging Perrin's coat as it slashed this way and that. Lightning forked in a cloudless sky. In the Mayenner camp, horses whinnied and reared at their ties. Thunder tolled repeatedly, and lightning writhed in silver-blue snakes, and beneath a burning sun, rain fell, fat, scattered drops that splashed fountains of dust where they hit bare ground. Perrin wiped one from his cheek and peered at damp fingers in amazement. In moments, the storm was gone, thunder and lightning rolling on eastward. Thirsty ground absorbed the raindrops that had fallen, the sun baked as fiercely as ever, and only flickering lights in the sky and fading booms said that anything had happened. Soldiers stared at each other uncertainly. Galien pried his fingers from the hilt of his sword with an obvious effort. This can't be the Dark One's work," Aram said, and flinched. No one had ever seen a natural storm like that. "It means the weather is changing, doesn't it, Lord Perrin? The weather is going to be right again?" Perrin opened his mouth to tell the man not to call him that, but he closed it again with a sigh. I don't know, he said. What was it Gol had said? Everything changes, Aram. Never thought that he would have to change too.
Chapter 11. Questions and an Oath. The air in the huge stable smelled of old hay and horse dung, and blood and burned flesh. With all the doors closed, the air felt thick. 2 lanterns gave little light, and shadows filled the interior. In the long rows of stalls, horses whickered nervously. The man hanging by his wrists from a roof beam gave a low moan, then a ragged cough. His head fell down on his chest. He was a tall man, well-muscled, if rather the worse for wear. Abruptly, Savannah realized that his chest no longer moved. The gem-studded rings on her fingers glittered red and green as she gestured curtly to Riala. The flame-haired woman pushed the man's head up and thumbed back one eyelid, then pressed an ear to his chest, careless of the still smoldering splinters that peppered him. With a sound of disgust, she straightened. He is dead. We should have left this to the maidens, Savannah, or the Black Eyes. I do not doubt we killed him by ignorance. Savannah's mouth tightened and she shifted her shawl in a clatter of bracelets. They ran nearly to her elbows, a noticeable weight in gold and ivory and gems, yet she would have worn every one she owned if she could. None of the other women said anything. Putting prisoners to the question was not the work of wise ones, but Riala knew why they had to do this themselves. The lone survivor of 10 mounted men who thought they could defeat 20 maidens because they rode horses, the man had also been the first Shan captured in the 10 days since their arrival in this land. He would have lived if he had not fought the pain so hard, Riala, Somerin said finally, shaking her head. A strong man for a wetlander, but he could not accept pain. Still, he told us much. Savannah eyed her sideways, trying to see whether she hid sarcasm. As tall as most men, Somerin wore more bracelets and necklaces than any woman there except Savannah herself, layers of fire and emeralds, rubies and sapphires, almost concealing a too full bosom that otherwise would have been half bared with her blouse undone almost to her skirt. Her shawl, tied around her waist, hid nothing. At times it was difficult for Savannah to tell whether Somerin was copying her or competing with her. Much, Mera exclaimed. In the light of the lantern she held, her long face was grimmer than usual, though that hardly seemed possible. Mera could find the dark side of the noonday sun. That his people lie 2 days west in the city called Amador? We knew that. All he has told us are wild tales. Arthur Hawkwing. Bah! The maidens should have kept him and done what was needed. Would you risk letting everyone learn too much too soon? Savannah bit her lip in vexation. She'd almost called them you fools. Too many already knew too much, in her opinion, wise ones among them, but she could not risk offending these women. That knowledge grated on her. The people are frightened. There was no need to hide her contempt for that, at least. What shocked her, outraged her, was not that they were afraid, but how few made any effort to hide the fact. Black Eyes or stone dogs or even maidens would have talked of what he said. You know they would. His lies would only have spread more fear. They had to be lies. In Savannah's mind, a sea was like the lakes she had seen in the wetlands, but with its far side beyond sight. If hundreds of thousands more of his people were coming, even from the other side of so large a body of water, the other prisoners she had questioned would have known of them, and no prisoner was questioned without her present. Tion raised the second lantern and regarded her with unblinking gray eyes. Nearly a head shorter than Somerin, Tion was still taller than Savannah, and twice as wide. Her round face often appeared placid, but thinking her so was a mistake. They are right to fear, she said in a stony voice. I am afraid and take no shame in it. The Shan are many if they are no more than Tuk Amador, and we are few. You have your sept around you, Savannah, but where is my sept? Your wetlander friend Kadar and his tame Aes Sedai sent us through his holes in the air to die. Where are the rest of the Shido? Riala moved to stand defiantly beside Tion, and they were quickly drawn by Alaris, even now toying with her black hair to draw attention to it. Or perhaps it was to avoid meeting Savannah's eyes. After a moment, a scowling Mera added herself to the cluster, and then Modara. Modara might have been called slim, if she were not even taller than Somerin. As it was, lean was the best that could be said of her. Savannah had thought Modara as firmly in her grasp as any of the rings on her fingers, as firmly in her grasp as... Somerin looked at her and sighed, looked at the others. Slowly, she walked over to stand beside them. Savannah was left standing on the very edge of the lantern's light. Of all the women tied to her by the killing of Desane, she trusted these most. Not that she trusted anyone very far, of course, but Somerin and Modara she had been sure were hers, as tightly as if they had sworn water oath to follow where she led. And now they dared face her with accusing eyes. Even Alaris looked up from playing with her hair. Savannah met their stares with a cool smile just short of a sneer. Now she decided was not the time to remind them of the crime that bound their fates together. Not the bludgeon this time. I suspected Kadar might try to betray us, she said instead. Riala's blue eyes widened at the admission, and Tian opened her mouth. Savannah went on, not leaving them room to speak. Would you rather have remained in Kinslayer's dagger to be destroyed? To be hunted like animals by 4 clans whose wise ones know how to make those holes without the traveling boxes? Instead, we are in the heart of a rich, soft land, richer even than the lands of the tree killers. Look at what we have taken in only 10 days. How much more will we take in a wetlander city? You fear the Shanshan because they have numbers? Remember that I brought every Shido wise one who can channel with me. That she could not channel herself seldom occurred to her now. Soon that lack would be remedied. We are as strong as any force these wetlanders can send against us, even if they do have flying lizards. She sniffed forcefully to show what she thought of those. None of them had seen one, nor any of the scouts, but nearly every prisoner had been full of the ridiculous tales. After we find the other septs, we will take this land for our own. All of it. We will extract a 10-fold repayment from the Aes Sedai, and we will find Kadar and make him die screaming for mercy. That should have rallied them, restored their hearts, as she had had to do before. Not one woman's face changed. Not one. And there is the Kara Khan, Tian said calmly, unless you have given up your plan to marry him. I have given up nothing, Savannah replied irritably. The man, and more important, the power that came with him, would be hers someday, somehow, whatever it took. Smoothing her voice, she went on, Rand al'Thor is hardly of consequence now, at least to these blind simpletons. With him in her hands, anything would be possible for her. I do not intend to stand here all day discussing my bridal wreath. I have matters to see to that are important. As she stalked away from them through the gloom toward the doors of the stable, an unpleasant thought suddenly occurred to her. She was alone with these women. How far could she trust them now? Desane's death remained all too vivid in her mind. The wise one had been butchered using the one power, by the women behind her, among others. The thought twisted her belly tight. She listened for the faint rustle of straw that would announce feet following her and heard nothing. Were they just standing there watching? She looked over her shoulder. Keeping the same slow pace required only a little effort. She would not display fear and shame herself. Yet when she pushed one of the tall doors open on its well-oiled hinges and stepped into bright midday light, she could not stop from drawing a relieved breath. Efalin was pacing outside, Shufa draped around her neck, bow cased on her back, spears and buckler in hand. The gray-haired woman turned abruptly, the worry on her face fading only a little at sight of Savannah. And she let her distress go. It was not Jung, but she had come with Savannah using the excuse that Savannah spoke as the chief, until a new chief of the Shido could be chosen. Savannah was sure that Efalin suspected that would never happen. Efalin knew where the power lay. and when to keep her mouth closed. "Bury him deeply and hide the grave," Savannah told her. Afalin nodded, signaling the maidens ringing the stable to their feet, and they vanished inside behind her. Savannah studied the building, with its sharp-peaked red roof and blue walls, then turned to the field in front of it. A low stone fence with a single opening right before the stable enclosed a circle of hard-packed dirt perhaps 100 paces across. The wetlanders had used it for training horses. Why it had been placed so far from everything else, surrounded by trees so tall that Savannah still sometimes stared at them, she had not thought to ask the former owners, but the isolation served her purposes. The maidens with Afalin were those who had captured the Shanchan. No one not here knew he existed, or would know. Were the other wise ones talking in there, about her? In front of them? What were they saying? She would not on them or anyone. They came out of the stable just as she started off toward the forest, Somerin and the others, and followed her into the trees, arguing among themselves about the Shanchan and Kadar, and where the rest of the Shido had been sent. Not about her, but then not where she could listen. What she did hear made her grimace. There were over 300 wise ones with the Jumai, and it was the same whenever 3 or 4 started talking. Where were the rest of the septs? And had Kadar been a spear hurled by Randall Thor? And how many Shanchan were there? And even did they really ride lizards? Lizards? These women had been with her from the first. She had guided their feet step by step, but they believed they had helped plan every move, believed they knew the destination. If she was losing them now... The forest gave way to a huge clearing that could have swallowed the circle back at the stables 50 times over, and Savannah felt ill temper slipping away as she stopped to look. Low hills rose to the north, and mountains a few leagues beyond them were capped with clouds, great masses of white streaked with dark gray. She had never seen so many clouds in her life. Closer at hand, thousands of Jumai went about the day's work. The ring of hammer on anvil rose from black. Sheep and goats were being slaughtered for the evening meal, their bleating mixed with the laughter of the children at play. Given more time to prepare for their flight from Kinslayer's dagger than the other septs, the Jumai had brought the flocks gathered in Kyrian and added to them here. Many people had set up their tents, but there was no need. Colorful structures nearly filled the clearing like a large wetlander village, tall barns and stables, a large forge and the squat roofs that had sheltered servants, all painted red and blue, surrounding the great roof itself. The manor house, that was called, 3 floors high beneath a dark green tile roof, all of it a paler green trimmed with yellow, atop a broad man-made stone hill 10 paces tall. Jumai and Gaishine climbed the long ramp that led to the great building's door and walked the ornately carved balconies that ringed it. The stone walls and palaces she had seen in Kyrian had not impressed her half so much. This one was painted like a wagon of the lost ones, but even so, marvelous. She should have realized that with so many trees, these people could afford to build anything of wood. Could no one but she see how fat this land was? More white-clad Gaishines, 26, nearly as many as there were Jumai. No one complained about making wetlanders Gaishine anymore. They were so docile. A wide-eyed young man in rough-sewn white hurried past, clutching a basket, gaping at the people around him and stumbling over the hem of his robe. Savannah smiled. That one's father had called himself the lord of this place, and blustered that she and her people would be hunted down, by children of all things, for this outrage. Yet now he wore white and worked as hard as his son, as did his wife and his daughters and his other sons. The women had possessed many fine gems and beautiful silks, and Savannah had only taken the first pick for herself. A fat land, so soft it oozed rich oils. The women behind her had stopped short to talk among themselves at the edge of the trees. She caught what they were saying, and it turned her mood again. How many Aes Sedai fight for these Shanchan, Tion was saying. We must learn that. So Marin agreement.
This make you busy.
I do not think it matters, Riala put in. At least her contrariness extended to the others, too. I do not think they will fight unless we attack them. We moved against them, not even to defend themselves. And when they did, Mara said sourly, 23 of us died. And more than 10,000 Al-Gaid Siswai did not return either. Here we have little more than a third of that number, even counting the brotherless. She soaked the last word in scorn. That was Randall Thor's work, Savannah told them sharply. Instead of thinking what he did against us, think what we can do when he is ours. When he is mine, she thought. The Aes Sedai had been able to take and hold him as long as they had, and she had something the Aes Sedai had not, else they would have used it. Remember instead that we had the Aes Sedai beaten until he took their side. Aes Sedai are nothing. Once again, her effort to strengthen their hearts produced no visible effect. All they could remember was that the spears had been broken trying to capture Randall Thor, and they with them. Modara might have been staring into the grave of all her sept, and even Tion frowned uneasily, doubtless recalling that she too had run like a frightened goat. Wise ones, a man's voice said behind Savannah, I have been sent to ask for your judgment. Instantly, every woman's face regained its equanimity. What she could do, he had done with his very presence. No wise one would allow another wise one to see of countenance. Alaris stopped stroking her hair, which she had pulled over her shoulder. Plainly, none of them recognized him. Savannah thought she did. He regarded them gravely, with green eyes much older than his smooth face. He had full lips, but there was a set to his mouth, as if he had forgotten how to smile. I am Kinwin, of the Meriden, wise ones. The Jumai say we may not take our full share from this place because we are not Jumai, but it is because they will have less, since we are two for every Jumai Al-Gaid Siswai. The brotherless ask your judgment, wise ones.
A lot cleaner than
now that they knew who he was, some could not hide their dislike of the men who had abandoned clan and sept to come to the Shido rather than follow Randall Thor, a wetlander and no true Karakarn, as they thought. Tion's face merely went flat, but Riala's eyes flashed, and Mera teetered on the edge of a scowl. Only Modara showed concern, but then she would have tried to settle a dispute between tree killers. These 6 wise ones will give judgment after hearing both sides, Savannah told Kinwin, with a graveness to match his. The other women looked at her, barely concealing their surprise that she intended to stand aside. It had been she who arranged for 10 times the number of Meriden to accompany the Jumai as went with any other sept. She really had suspected Kadar, if not of what he had done, and she had wanted as many spears around her as possible. Besides, they could always die in place of Jumai. She affected surprise at the others' surprise. It would not be fair for me to take part since my own sept is involved, she told them before turning back to the green-eyed man. They will give fair judgment, Kinwin, and I am certain they will speak in favor of the Meriden. The other women gave her hard looks before Tion motioned abruptly for Kinwin to lead the way. He had to tear his eyes away from Savannah to comply. Wearing a faint smile, he had been staring at her, not Somerin. She watched them vanish into the mass of people moving about the manor grounds. For all their misliking the brotherless, and her making predictions to the man about their decision, the chances were they would decide that way. Either way, Kinwin would remember and tell the others of his so-called society. The Jumai were already in her belt pouch, but anything that tied the Meriden to her was welcome. Turning, Savannah strode back into the trees, though not toward the stable. Now that she was alone, she could see to something much more important than the brotherless. She checked what she had tucked into her skirt at the small of her back, where her shawl hid it. She would have felt if it slipped a hair, but she wanted to touch its smooth length with her fingertips. No wise one would dare think her less than they once she used that, perhaps today. And one day it would give her Randall Thor. After all, if Kadar had lied in one thing, maybe he had lied in others. Through a blur of tears, Galina Kazban glared at the wise one shielding her, as if there were any need for the slender woman's shield. Right then, she would not have so much as embraced the source. Sitting cross-legged on the ground between two squatting maidens, Belinda adjusted her shawl and gave a thin smile, as if she knew Galina's thoughts. Her face was narrow and fox-like, and her hair and eyebrows had been bleached nearly white by the sun. Galina wished she had crushed her skull instead of merely slapping her. It had not been an attempt at escape, merely more frustration than she could bear. Her days began and ended with exhaustion, every day more than the last. She could not remember how long since they had stuffed her into that coarse black ran together like an everlasting a month. Surely not more. She wished she had never touched Belinda. If the woman had not stuffed rags into her mouth to silence her sobbing, she would have begged to be allowed to carry rocks again, or move a pile of pebbles stone by stone, or any of the tortures they filled her hours with. Anything rather than this. Only Galina's head stuck out of the leather sack that hung suspended from the stout limb of an oak. Directly beneath the sack, coals glowed in a bronze brazier, a slow burn heating the air inside the sack. She huddled in that sweltering heat with her thumbs tied to her toes, sweat slicking her nakedness. Her hair clung damply to her face and she panted, nostrils flaring for air when she was not singing. Even so, this would have been better than the endless, senseless, back-breaking labor they subjected her to, except for one thing. Before snugging the neck of the sack beneath her chin, Belinda had emptied a pouch of some fine powder. She had begun to sweat. It had begun to burn like pepper flung in the eyes. It seemed to coat her from the shoulders down, and oh, light it burned. That she called on the light measured her desperation, but they had not broken her for all their trying. She would get free. She would. And once she would make these savages pay in blood, rivers of
She gets
blood,
mad.
oceans. She would have them all skinned alive. She would... Flinging back her head, she howled. The wadded rags in her mouth muffled the sound, but she howled, and she did not know whether it was a shriek of rage or a scream for mercy. When her howls died and her head fell forward, Belinda and the maidens were on their feet, and Savannah was with them. Galina attempted to stifle her sobbing in front of the golden-haired woman, but she could as soon have plucked the sun from the sky with her fingers. Listen to her whine and snivel, Savannah sneered, coming to look up at her. Galina tried to put an equal contempt in her own stare. Savannah decked herself with enough jewelry for 10 women, wore her blouse unlaced to nearly bare her bosom, except for all those mismatched necklaces, and breathed deep when men looked at her. Galina tried, but contempt was hard to manage, with tears rolling down her cheeks along with her sweat. She shook with weeping, making the sack sway. This datsang is tough as an old ewe, Belinda cackled. But I always found even the toughest old ewe was made tender if cooked slowly with the right herbs. When I was a maiden, I softened stone dogs with enough cooking. Galina closed her eyes. Oceans of blood to pay for... The sack lurched, and Galina's eyes popped open as it began to settle. The maidens had undone the rope running over the limb, and the pair of them were lowering her slowly. Frantically, she thrashed about, trying to look down, and knew with relief when she saw that the brazier had been moved aside. With Belinda's talk of cooking, that would be the fate, Galina decided, tied to a spit and turned over a fire until her juices dripped. That to begin. With a thud that made Galina grunt, the leather bag hit the ground and toppled over. As unconcerned as if they were handling a sack of potatoes, the maidens tumbled her out onto the brown weeds, sliced the cords that held her thumbs and toes, plucked the gag from between her teeth. Dirt and dead leaves stuck to the sweat coating her. She very much wanted to stand, to meet them all eye to eye and glare for glare. Instead, she rose only as far as hands and knees, dug her fingers into the forest floor, dug her toes in. Any further, and she would not be able to stop her hands from flying to soothe her red, flaming skin. Her sweat felt like the juice of ice peppers. All she could do was crouch there and quiver, try to work some moisture back into her mouth, and daydream of what she would do to these savages. "Believed you were stronger than this," Savannah said above her in thoughtful tones. "But perhaps Belinda is right. Perhaps you are soft enough now. If you swear to obey me, you can stop being Datsang. Perhaps you will not even have to be Gaishain. Will you swear to obey me in all things?" "Yes." The hoarse word flew from Galina's tongue without hesitation, though she had to swallow before speaking more. "I will obey you, I swear it." And so she would obey, until they gave the opening she needed. Was this all that had been necessary? An oath she would have made the first day? Savannah would learn what it was like to hang over hot coals. Oh, yes, she... "Then you will not object to swearing your oath on this," Savannah said, tossing something down in front of her. Galina's scalp crawled as she stared at it. A white rod like polished ivory, a foot long and no thicker than her wrist. Then she saw the flowing marks carved into the end toward her,
Number 2
numerals used in the Age of Legends. 111. She had thought it was the oath rod somehow stolen from the White Tower. That also was marked, but with the numeral 3, which some thought stood for the 3 oaths. Maybe this was not what it seemed. Maybe. Yet no hooded viper from the drowned lands coiled there could have frozen her so still. "Oath, Savannah. When did you intend to tell the rest of us?" That voice jerked Galina's head up. It could have pulled her eyes away from a hooded viper, too. Therava appeared among the trees, leading a dozen cold-faced wise ones. When they stopped behind her, confronting Savannah, every woman present except for the maidens had been there when Galina was sentenced to wear the black robe. A word from Therava, a short nod from Savannah, and the maidens departed swiftly. Sweat still oozed from Galina, but suddenly the air seemed cold. Savannah glanced at Belinda, who avoided her eye. Savannah's lip curled, half sneer, half snarl, and she planted fists on hips. Galina did not understand where she found the nerve, a woman who could not channel at all. Some of these women possessed not inconsiderable strength. No, she could not afford to think them only as wilders if she was to escape and have her revenge. Therava and Somerin were stronger than any woman in the tower, and any of them could have been Aes Sedai easily. But Savannah faced them defiantly. "It seems you rendered justice quickly," she said in a voice dry as dust. "The matter was simple," Tion replied calmly. "The men justice they deserved. And are told they received it in spite of your attempt to sway us," Riala added with some heat. Savannah nearly did snarl at that. Therava would not be diverted from her purpose, though. In one swift step, she reached Galina, gripped a handful of her hair, and jerked her up to her knees, bent her head back. Therava was not the tallest of these women by at least a head, yet she loomed taller than most men, staring down with a hawk's eyes, driving away every thought of revenge or defiance. The white streaks touching her dark red hair only made her face more commanding. Galina's hands clenched into fists on her thighs, nails digging into her palms. Even the burning of her skin paled under that stare. She had daydreamed about breaking every one of these women, making them plead for death, laughing as she denied their begging. About everyone except Therava. At night, Therava filled her dreams, and all Galina could do was try to flee. The only escape was to wake screaming. Galina had broken strong men and strong women, but she stared up at Therava wide-eyed and whined. "This one has no honor to shame." Therava almost spat the words. "If you want her broken, Savannah, let me have her. When I am done, she will obey without the need for your friend Kedar's toy." Savannah spoke up heatedly, denying friendship with this Kedar, whoever he was, and Riala barked that Savannah had brought him to the others, and others began arguing about whether the binder would work any better than the traveling box. A small part of Galina's mind seized on mention of the traveling box. She had heard it spoken of before, longed to lay hands on it, if only for a moment. With a ter'angreal that enabled her to travel, however imperfectly it seemed to work, she would be able to. Even hope of escape could not stand against thoughts of what Tharava would do to her if the others decided to give in to the woman's request. When the hawk-eyed wise one loosed her hair to join the argument, Galina hurled herself at the rod, landing flat on her belly. Anything, even having to obey Savannah, was better than being handed over to Tharava. If she had not been shielded, she would have channeled to operate the rod herself. No sooner did her fingers close on the smooth rod than Tharava's foot came down on it hard, trapping her hands painfully against the ground. None of the wise ones so much as glanced at her. She lay writhing, trying futilely to pull free. She could not make herself pull too hard. Dimly she could recall making rulers pale with fear, but she did not dare disturb this woman's foot. "If she is to swear," Tharava said, staring hard at Savannah, "it should be to obey all of us here." The others nodded, some voicing agreement, all but Belinda, and she pursed her lips thoughtfully. Savannah stared back just as hard. "Very well," she acceded finally. "But me first among us. I am not only a wise one, I speak as the clan chief." Tharava smiled thinly. "So you do. Two among us first, Savannah. You and I." Not a whisper of defiance faded from Savannah's face, but she nodded. Grudgingly. Only then did Tharava move her foot. The light of Saidar surrounded her, and a flow of spirit touched the numerals at the end of the rod in Galina's hands, just as was done with the oath rod. For an instant, Galina hesitated, flexing mashed fingers. It felt the same as the oath rod, too. Not quite like ivory, not quite like glass, distinctly cool on her palms. If it was a second oath rod, it could be used to remove any oath she swore now, if she were given the opportunity. She did not want to take the chance, did not want to swear to Tharava in any case.
Hell yeah.
Always before this in her life, she had commanded. Life since her capture had been misery, but Tharava would make her a lapdog. Yet if she did not, would they let Tharava break her? She could not find the smallest particle of doubt that the woman would do just that. Utterly. Under the light and by my hope of salvation and rebirth. She no longer believed in the light or a hope of salvation, and there was no need to speak more than a simple promise, but they expected a strong oath. "I swear to obey every wise one present here in all things, and first among them Tharava and Savannah." The last hope that this binder was something else vanished as Galina felt the oath settle on her, as if she suddenly wore a garment that covered her far too tightly, from her scalp to the soles of her feet. Throwing back her head, in part that was because it suddenly seemed as if the burning of her skin was being pressed deep into her flesh, but mainly it was pure despair. "Be quiet," Tharava said sharply. "I do not want to listen to you wailing." Galina's teeth clicked shut, nearly biting her tongue, and she struggled to swallow her sobs. Nothing but obedience was possible now. Tharava frowned at her. "Let us see if this truly works," she muttered, bending closer. "Have you planned violence against any wise one here? Answer truthfully and ask to be punished if you have. The penalty for violence against a wise one," she added like an afterthought, "can be to be killed like an animal." She drew a finger expressively across her throat, then gripped her belt knife with the same hand. Gulping air in horrified panic, Galina shied back from the woman. She could not take her eyes away from Tharava's, though, and she could not stop the words that chattered through her teeth. "I did against all of you. Please punish me for it." Would they kill her now? After all of this, was she to die here? "It seems this binder does as your friend claimed after all, Savannah." Plucking the rod from Galina's limp hands, Tharava tucked it behind her belt as she straightened. "It also seems that you will wear white after all, Galina Kazban." For some reason, she gave a pleased smile at that, but she issued other commands, too. "You will behave meekly as a Gaishain should. If a child tells you to jump, you will jump unless one of us has said otherwise. And you will not touch Sidar or Channel unless one of us tells you. Release the shield on her, Belinda." The shield vanished, and Galena knelt there, staring hollowly. The source shone just out of sight, tantalizing, and she could have sprouted wings as easily as she could stretch out for it. Bracelets clattered as Savannah shifted her shawl in anger. "You take too much on yourself, Tharava. That is mine. Give it to me." She held out her hand, but Tharava merely folded her arms beneath her breasts. "There have been meetings among the wise ones," the stern-eyed woman told Savannah. "We have reached certain decisions." The women who had come with her gathered behind her, all of them facing Savannah, and Belinda hurried to join them. "Without me?" Savannah snapped. "Do any of you dare reach a decision without me?" Her tone remained as strong as ever, but her eyes flickered to the rod in Tharava's belt, and Galena thought there was a touch of uneasiness there. Another time she would have been delighted to see it. "One decision had to be reached without you," Tion said in a flat voice. "As you so often point out, you speak as the clan chief," Emerus added, a mocking light in her big gray eyes. "Sometimes wise ones must speak without a clan chief listening, or someone who speaks as a chief." "We decided," Tharava said, "that just as a clan chief must have a wise one to advise him, so must you have a wise one's advice. I will advise you." Bring her all around, Savannah in confronting her. How did she do it? They could crush her like an egg beneath a hammer. "And what advice do you offer me, Tharava?" she said at last in an icy voice. "My strong advice is that we move without delay," Tharava replied, as cool as Savannah. "These Shanchan are too close and too many. We should move north into these mountains of mist and establish a hold. From there we can send parties to find the other septs. It may take long to reunite the Shido, Savannah. Your wetlander friend may have scattered us to the 9 corners of the world. Until we do that, we are vulnerable. We will move tomorrow."
What happened?
Corners of the world.
I'm not
Until
sure
we
why
do
it
that,
stopped.
we are vulnerable. We will move tomorrow. If Galena had not been sure she knew Savannah inside and out, She would have thought the woman sounded petulant as well as angry. Those green eyes flashed. But east. That also is away from the Shan-Chan, and the lands to the east are in turmoil, ripe for plucking. There was a long silence. Then Therava nodded.
I have this
East.
son. I have.
She said the
something
word
going, I guess I
softly.
didn't notice.
The softness of silk laid over steel. But remember that clan chiefs have lived to regret rejecting a wise one's advice too often. You may as well. The threat on her face was plain as that in her voice, yet Savannah laughed. You remember, Therava. All of you remember. If I am left for the vultures, so will you be. I have made assurance of that. The other women exchanged worried glances, all but Therava, and Modara and Norlia frowned. Slumped on her knees, whimpering and trying in vain to soothe her skin with her hand, Galina felt what these threats meant. It was a small thought, worming through bitterness and self-pity. Anything she could use against these women would be welcome, if she dared use it. A bitter thought. Abruptly, she realized that the sky was turning dark. Billowing clouds were rolling down from the north, streaked gray and black, obscuring the sun. And beneath the cloud fell flurries of snow swirling in the air. None reached the ground. Few fell as far as the treetops, but Galina gaped. Snow? Had the great lord loosened his grip on the world for some reason? The wise ones stared at the sky, too, mouths hanging open as if they had never seen clouds, much less snow. What is this, Galina Kazban? Therava demanded. Speak if you know. She did not look away from the sky until Galina told her it was snow, and when she did, it was to laugh. I always thought the men who ran down Lehman Tree Killer lied about snow. This could not hamper a mouse. Galina clamped her jaws shut on explaining about snowfalls, aghast that her instinct had been to curry favor, aghast as well at the small pang of pleasure that keeping the information back gave. I am the highest of the Red Aja, she reminded herself. I sit on the Supreme Council of the Black Aja. They sounded like lies. This was not fair. If we are done here, Savannah said, I will take the Gaishine back to the Great Roof and see her put in white. You can remain and stare at the snow if you wish. Her tone was so smooth, like butter in the tub, that no one would have thought her at Daggers' points only moments earlier. She looped her shawl over her elbows and adjusted some of her necklaces. Nothing in the world concerned her more. We will take care of the Gaishine, Therava told her just as smoothly. Since you speak as the chief, you stop pouting. Head down, Galina scrambled to her feet and scurried after Therava and the other women who could channel. Pouting? She might have been scowling, but never pouting. Her thoughts scrabbled like rats in a cage, finding no hope of escape. There had to be one. There had to be. One thought that surfaced in the middle of the turmoil almost made her begin weeping again. Were Gaishine robes softer than the scratchy black wool she had been forced to wear so far? There had to be a way out. A hasty glance back after them. The world and the falling snow melted like Galina's hopes. Chapter 12. New Alliances. Grandal wished there had been even a simple transcriber among the things she had removed from Ilion after Samael's death. This age was frightful usually, primitive and uncomfortable. Still, some of it suited her. In a large bamboo cage at the far end of the room, 100 brightly plumaged birds sang melodiously, almost as beautiful in their multicolored flitting as her two pets in transparent robes, who waited on either side of the door, their gazes locked on her, eager to serve her pleasure. If oil lamps did not give the same light as glow bulbs, aided by large mirrors on the walls, they produced a certain barbaric splendor with the gilded fish-scale ceiling. It would have been nice to need only speak the words, but actually putting them on paper with her own hand produced a pleasure akin to that she felt in sketching. The script of this age was quite simple, and learning to duplicate another's style had been no more difficult. Signing with a flourish, not her own name, of course, she sanded the thick page, then folded it and sealed it with one of the signet rings of various sizes that made a decorative line across the writing table. The hand and sword of Aradoman impressed on an irregular circle of blue and green wax. "Take this to Lord Ituralde with all speed," she said, "and say only what I told you." "As fast as horses can carry me, my lady." Nazran bowed as he took the letter, one finger stroking thin black mustaches above a winning smile. Square and deeply brown in a well-fitting blue coat, he was handsome, just not sufficiently handsome. "I received this from the Lady Tuva, who died of her wounds after telling me that she was a Alsam had been a grave. Sure there is human blood on it," she admonished. She doubted anyone in this time could tell human blood from any other, but she had found too many surprises to take an unnecessary chance. Enough for realism, not enough to spoil what I wrote. His black eyes lingered warmly on her as he bowed again, but as soon as he straightened, he hurried to the door, boots thudding on the pale marble floor. He didn't notice the servants with their eyes fixed ardently on her, or he affected not to notice, though he had once been a friend of the young man. Only a touch of compulsion had been needed to make Nazran nearly as avid to obey as they, not to mention certain that he might yet taste her charm. She laughed softly. Well, he believed he had tasted, and he might have. Of course, he would have been useless for anything else then. He would ride horses to death, reaching Ituralde, and if that message, delivered by Al-Salam's close cousin, supposedly coming from himself and with gray men trying not a signet, a plain golden band too small for any but her little finger. It had been a pleasant surprise to find an Angreal attuned to women among Samael's possessions, a pleasant surprise to have time anything useful with Althor and those puppies who called themselves Ashan constantly in and out of Samael's chambers in the great hall of the council. They had stripped it bare of what she had not taken. Dangerous puppies, all of them, especially Althor, and she had not wanted to risk anyone being able to draw a line from Samael to her. Yes, she must increase the pace of her own plans and distance herself from Samael's disaster. Abruptly, a vertical slash of silver appeared at the far end of the room, bright against the tapestries hanging between the heavy gilded mirrors, and a crystalline chime rang loud. Her eyebrows rose in surprise. Someone remembered the courtesies of a more civilized age, it seemed. Standing, she forced the plain band of gold down against the ruby ring on her smallest finger, and embraced Sidar through it before channeling the web that would sound an answering chime for whoever wanted to open a gateway. The Angreal did not offer much, yet anyone who thought they knew her strength would find a shock. The gateway opened, and two women in nearly identical red and black silk dresses stepped through warily. At least Mogedion moved cautiously, dark eyes flickering in search of traps, hands smoothing her wide skirts. The gateway winked out after a moment, but she held on to Sidar. A sensible precaution, though Mogedion had always been a great one for precautions. Grandal did not let go of the source either. Mogedion's companion, a short young woman with long silver hair and vivid blue eyes, stared about her coldly, hardly more than glancing in Grandal's direction. By her demeanor, she might have been a prime counselor forced to endure the company of common laborers and intent on ignoring their existence.
That's my last good set.
A foolish girl to imitate the spider. Red and black did not suit her coloring, and she should have made better use of such an impressive bosom. "This is Sindane,
like
Grandal,"
really
Mogedion said. "We are working together." She did not smile when she named the haughty young woman, but Grandal did. A pretty name for a more than pretty girl. But what twist of fate had led some mother of this time to give her daughter a name that meant last chance?
I'll be right back.
Sindane's face remained cold and smooth, but her eyes flared. A beautiful doll carved from ice with hidden fires. It seemed she knew the meaning, and did not like it. "What brings you and your friend, Mogedion?" Grendal asked. The spider was the very last she had expected to come out from the shadows. "Have no fear of speaking in front of my servants." She gestured, and the pair by the door sank to their knees. They would not command, but close. "What interest can you find in them when you destroy anything that might make them interesting?" Sindane demanded, striding arrogantly across the floor. She held herself very straight, striving for every hair of height. "Do you know that Samael is dead?" Grendal kept her own face smooth with a little effort. She had supposed this girl some friend of the dark, whom Mogedion had picked up to run errands, perhaps a noble who thought her title counted. But now that she was close, the girl was stronger in the one power than she herself. Even in her own age, that had been uncommon among men, and very rare in... "I suspected," she replied, directing a false smile over the young woman's head at Mogedion. How much did she know? Where had the spider found a girl so much stronger than she, and why was she traveling with her? Mogedion had always been jealous of anyone with more strength, or more of anything. "He used to visit me, importuning my help in one mad plan or another. I never rejected him outright. You know, Samael was a dangerous man to reject. He appeared every few days without fail, and when he stopped, I assumed something dire had happened to him. Who is this girl, Mogedion? A remarkable find." The young woman stepped closer, staring up at her with eyes like blue fire. "She told you my name. That is all you need know." The girl knew she spoke to one chosen, and yet her tone remained frost. Even given her strength, this was no simple friend of the dark, unless she was insane. "Have you paid attention to the weather, Grendal?" Abruptly, Grendal realized that Mogedion was letting the girl do all the talking, hanging back until a weakness became apparent, and Grendal had been letting her. "I do not suppose you came to tell me of Samael's death, Mogedion," she said sharply, "or to talk about weather. You know I seldom go outside." Nature was unruly, lacking order. There were not even windows in this room, nor in most that she used. "What do you want?" The dark-haired woman was edging sideways along the wall. The glow of the one power still surrounded her. Grendal stepped casually so that both remained in her sight. "You make a mistake, Grendal." A chilly smile barely curved Sindane's full lips. She was enjoying this. "I lead between us. Mogedion is in a bad odor with Moradin for her recent mistakes." Wrapping her arms around herself, Mogedion shot the silver-haired little woman a scowl as good as any spoken confirmation. Suddenly, Sindane's big eyes opened even wider, and she gasped, shuddering. Mogedion's glare turned malicious. "You lead for the moment," she sneered. "Your place in his eyes is not far better than mine." And then she gave a start and shivered, biting her lip. Was she being toyed with? Grendal wondered. The pure hatred for each other on the two women's faces seemed unfeigned. Either way, she would see how they enjoyed being played. Unconsciously rubbing her hands together, rubbing the angreal on her finger, she moved to a chair without taking her eyes from the pair. The sweetness of Sidar flowing into her was a comfort. Not that she needed comfort, but there was something odd here. The high, straight back, thickly carved and gilded, made the chair seem a throne, though it was no different from any other in the room. Such things affected even the most sophisticated on levels they never knew consciously. She sat leaning back with her legs crossed, one foot kicking idly, the picture of a woman at her ease, and made her voice bored. "Since you lead, child, tell me, when this man who calls himself Death is in his skin, who is he? What is he?" "Moradin is nameless." The girl's voice was calm and cold and arrogant. "The Great Lord has decided it is time for you to serve the nameless too." Grendal jerked upright. This is preposterous. She could not keep the anger from her voice. A man I've never heard of has been named the Great Lord's regent on Earth? She did not mind when others tried to manipulate her. She always found a way to turn their schemes against them. But Mogedion must take her for a half-wit. She had no doubt that Mogedion was directing this obnoxious girl, whatever they claimed, whatever looks they stabbed at each other. I serve the great lord and myself, no other. I think the two of you should go now and play your little game elsewhere. Demon Dread might be diverted by it, or Semirag. Be careful how you channel in leaving. I have set a few inverted webs, and you would not want to trigger one. That was a lie, but a very believable one. So it came as a shock when Mogedion suddenly channeled and every lamp in the room went out, plunging them into darkness. Instantly, Grendal flung herself from the chair so as not to be where they had last seen her, and she also channeled even as she moved, weaving a web of light that hung to one side, a sphere of pure white that cast lurid shadows about the room, and revealed the pair clearly. Without hesitation, she channeled again, drawing the full strength of the little ring. She did not need it all, or even most, but she wanted every advantage she could find. Attack her, would they? A net of compulsion tightened on each of them before they could twitch. She had spun the net strong for anger's sake, nearly strong enough to do harm, and the women stood staring at her adoringly, eyes wide and mouths hanging open in adulation, intoxicated with worship. They were hers to command now. If she told them to cut their own throats, they would. Suddenly, Grendal realized that Mogedion was no longer embracing the source. This much compulsion might have shocked her into letting go. The servants by the door had not moved, of course. Now, she said a touch breathlessly, you will answer my questions. She had a number, including who was this Moradin fellow, if there was such a man, and where had Sindane come from, but one piqued her more than the rest. What did you hope to gain by this, Mogedion? I may decide to knot those webs on you. You can pay for your game by serving me. No, please, Mogedion groaned, wringing her hands. She actually began to weep. You will kill us all. Please, you must serve the Nameless. That is what we came for, to bring you to Moradin's service. The silver-haired little woman's face was a shadowed mask of terror in the pale light, her bosom heaving as she gulped breath. Suddenly uneasy, Grendal opened her mouth. This made less and less sense by the moment. She opened her mouth, and the true source vanished. The one power vanished from her, and blackness swallowed the room again. Abruptly, the caged birds broke into a frenzy of chirruping. Their wings fluttered frantically against the bamboo bars. Behind her, a voice rasped like rock being ground to dust. The great lord thought you might not take their word, Grendal. The time when you could go your own way has passed. A ball of something appeared in the mirror, a dead black globe, but a silver light filled the room. The mirrors did not shine. They seemed to dull in that light. The birds went still, silent. Somehow, Grendal knew they had frozen in terror. She gaped at the Myrddraal standing there, pale and eyeless and clothed in black deeper than the ball, but larger than any she had ever seen. It had to be the reason she could not sense the source, but that was impossible. Except, where had that strange sphere of black light come from, if not from it? She had never felt the same fear others did at a Myrddraal's gaze, not to the same degree. Yet her hands rose on their own, and she had to snatch them down to keep from covering her face. Glancing toward Mogedion and Sindane, she flinched. They had adopted the same pose as her servants, crouching on their knees, heads to the floor toward the Myrddraal. She had to work moisture into her mouth. You are a messenger from the Great Lord? Her voice was steady but weak. She had never heard of such a thing, the Great Lord sending a message by Myrddraal, and yet Mogedion was a physical coward, but still one of the chosen, and she groveled as assiduously as the girl. And there was the light. Grendal found herself wishing her dress were not cut so low. Ridiculous, of course. Myrddraal's appetites for women were well known, but she was one of the... Her eyes drifted to Mogedion once more. The Myrddraal strode by her sinuously, seeming not to pay her any heed. Its long black cloak hung undisturbed by its movements. Aginor had thought the creatures were not quite in the world in the same way everything else was. Slightly out of phase with time and reality, he had called it, whatever that meant. I am Shaidar Haran. Stopping by her servants, the Murdral bent to grip them by the backs of their necks, one hand to each. When I speak, you may consider that you hear the voice of the great Lord of the Dark. Those hands tightened to the surprisingly loud sound of cracking bone. The young man spasmed as he died, kicking out. The young woman merely went limp. They had been two of her prettiest. The Murdral straightened from the corpses. I am his hand in the world, Grendal. When you stand before me, you stand before him. Grendal considered carefully, if quickly. She was afraid, an emotion she was far more used to inspiring in others, but she knew how to control her fear. While she had never commanded armies as some of the others had, she was neither a stranger to hazard nor a coward, yet this was more than a mere threat. Mogedion and Sindane still knelt with their heads to the marble floor, Mogedion actually trembling visibly. Grendal believed this Murdral, or whatever it truly was. The Great Lord was taking a more direct hand in events, as she had feared. And if he learned of her scheming with Samael, if he chose to take action, that was, betting that he did not know was a foolish wager at this point. She knelt smoothly before the Murdral. What would you have me do? Her voice had regained its strength. Unnecessary flexibility was not cowardice. Those who did not bend for the Great Lord were bent, or snapped in two. Should I call you Great Master, or would you prefer another title? I would not feel comfortable addressing even the Great Lord's hand as I would him. Shockingly, the Murdral laughed. It sounded like ice crumbling. Murdral never laughed. You are braver than most, and wiser. Shaidar Haran will do for you, so long as you remember who I am, so long as you do not let bravery overcome your fear too far. As it issued its commands, a visit to this Moradin was first, it seemed. She would need to be on her guard against Mogedion, and perhaps Sindane also, taking revenge for her brief use of compulsion. She doubted the girl was any more forgiving than the spider. She decided to keep to herself the letter she had sent to Rodel Iturralda. Nothing she was told indicated that her actions would be displeasing to the Great Lord, and she still had to consider her own position. Moradin, whoever he was, might be nameless today, but there was always tomorrow. Bracing herself against the rocking of Ireland's coach, Cadswain moved one of the leather window curtains far enough to see out. A light rain fell on Kyrian from a gray sky full of blustering clouds and rough swirling winds. Not only the sky was full of wind, howling gusts rocked the coach more than did its forward motion. Tiny droplets stung her hand, cold as ice. If the air cooled a little more, there would be snow. She drew her woolen cloak closer. She had been pleased to find it, shoved to the bottom of her saddlebags. The air would cool. The city's steep slate roofs and stone-paved streets glistened wetly, and though the rain was not hard, few were willing to brave the strong winds. A woman guiding an ox cart with taps of a long goad moved as patiently as her ox, but most people afoot clutched cloaks tightly, hoods pulled down, and stepped quickly as the bearers of a sedan chair rushed by, its stiff con fluttering. Others beside the woman and her ox saw no reason for haste, though. In the middle of the street, a towering Aiel man stood gaping at the sky in disbelief while the drizzle soaked him, so absorbed that a daring cutpurse sliced away his belt pouch and darted off unnoticed by his victim. A woman whose elaborately curled high-piled hair marked her as noble walked long hood as well. This might have been the time ever that she had actually walked in the streets, but she was laughing as the rain slicked her cheeks. From the doorway of a perfumer's shop, the shopkeeper stared out disconsolately. She would do little business today. Most of the hawkers had vanished for the same. People still hopefully cried hot tea and meat pies from barrows beneath makeshift awnings, though anyone who bought a meat pie in the street these days deserved the bellyache she would get. A pair of starving dogs ran out from an alley, stiff-legged and hackles up, barking and snarling at the coach. Cadsuane let the curtain fall. Dogs seemed to know women who could channel as easily as cats did, but dogs appeared to think the women were cats, if unnaturally large ones. The pair of women seated across from her were still in conversation. "Forgive me," Daigyan was saying, "but the logic is inescapable." She ducked her head apologetically, making the moonstone dangling on a fine silver chain from her long black hair sway across her forehead. Her fingers plucked the white slashes in her dark skirts, and she spoke rapidly, as though afraid of being interrupted. "If you accept that the lingering heat was the Dark One's work, the change must be by some other agency. He would not have relented. You might say that he has decided to freeze or drown the world instead of baking it, but why? Had the heat continued through spring, the dead might well have outnumbered the living, no different than if snow falls into the summer. Therefore, logically, some other hand is at work." The plump woman's diffidence was trying at times, but as always, Cadsuane found her logic impeccable. She just wished she knew whose hand and to what end. "Peace," Kumira muttered. "I would rather an ounce of hard proof than 100 weight of your white Ajan logic." She was brown herself, though little given to their usual failings. A handsome woman with short-cut hair, she was hard-headed and practical, a keen observer, and never lost herself so deeply in thought that she lost sight of the world around her as well. No sooner had Kumira spoken than she patted Daigyan's knee with a graceful hand and gave a smile that changed her blue eyes from sharp to warm. Shinarans were a polite people, by and large, and Kumira took care not to offend. By accident, at least. "Put your mind to what we can do about the sisters held by the Aiel. I know you'll reason out something, if anyone can." Cadsuane snorted. "They deserve whatever happens to them." She had not been allowed near the Aiel tents herself, nor had any of her companions, but some of the fools who had sworn fealty to the Althor boy had ventured out to the sprawling encampment and come back white-faced and torn between outrage and sicking up. Normally, she also would have been furious over the affront to Aes Sedai dignity, whatever the circumstances. Not now. To achieve her goal, she would have run the entire White Tower through the streets naked. How could she concern herself with the discomfort of women who might have ruined everything? Mira opened her mouth to protest, despite knowing her feelings, but Cadsuane went on, calm yet relentless. "Perhaps they'll weep enough to atone for the dog's dinner they made of matters, but I doubt it. They are out of our hands, and if they were in mine, I might just give them to the Aiel. Forget them, Daigyan, and put that fine mind of yours on the track I set you." The Kyrianan woman's pale cheeks flushed red at this compliment. Thank the light she was not this way except with other sisters. Kumira sat silently, very smooth-faced, her hands in her lap. She might be subdued now, but little could subdue Kumira for long. They were exactly the pair Cadsuane wanted with her today. The coach tilted as the team started up the long ramp leading to the Sun Palace. "Remember what I told you," she told the other two firmly, "and have a care." They murmured that they would, as well they might, and she nodded. If need demanded, she would use them both for mulch, and others too, but she did not intend to lose either because they grew careless. There was no bother or delay letting the coach through the palace gates. The guards recognized Arlen's sigil on the doors, and they knew who would be riding inside. That coach had been to the palace often enough in the past week. The moment the horses halted, an anxious-eyed footman in unadorned black opened the coach door, holding out a broad, flat parasol with cloth. Rain dripped from the edge onto his bare head, but then it was not intended for his shelter. Quickly touching the ornaments dangling from the bun atop her head to be sure they were all there. She had never lost one, but that was because she was careful of them. Cadsuane gathered the handles of her square wicker sewing basket from beneath her seat and stepped down. Half a dozen footmen stood waiting behind the first, parasols at the ready. So many passengers would have crowded the coach beyond comfort, But the footmen were not about to be caught short, and the extra did not hurry away until it was plain enough there were only the three of them. Obviously, the coach had been seen coming. Dark-garbed serving men and women made a neat array on the deep blue and gold tiles of the great entry hall, with its square vaulted ceiling 5 spans high. They leaped forward, taking cloaks, offering small warm linen towels in case anyone needed to dry face or hands, proffering seafolk porcelain goblets of mulled wine that gave off a heady scent of spices. A winter drink, yet the sudden drop in temperature made it suitable. And after all, it was winter. Finally. 3 Aes Sedai stood waiting to one side among the massive square columns of dark marble in front of tall, pale friezes depicting battles, no doubt important to Cairhien, but Cadsuane ignored the women for the time being. One of the young serving men had a small red and gold figure embroidered on the left breast of his coat, what people were calling a dragon. Corgaida, the grave-faced, gray-haired woman who ordered the servants in the Sun Palace, wore no ornament, save for the large ring of heavy keys at her waist. Nor did anyone else have any decoration on their clothes, and despite the young man's apparent enthusiasm, it was Corgaida, the holder of the keys, who would set the mood among the servants. Still, she had allowed the young fellow his embroidery, a point to remember. Cadsuane spoke to her quietly, asking after a room where she might work her embroidery hoop undisturbed, and the woman did not blink at the request. But then, doubtless, she had heard stranger serving in this place. As the servants, with the cloaks and trays, bowed and curtsied themselves off, Cadsuane finally turned to the 3 sisters among the columns. They were all looking at her, ignoring Kumira and Daigyan. Corgaida remained, but she stayed well back, giving the Aes Sedai privacy. "I hardly expected to find you strolling about at your ease," Cadsuane said. "I thought the Aiel worked their apprentices hard." Phaedrin barely reacted, merely a slight jerk of her head that softly rattled the colored beads in her thin braids, but Mirana colored with embarrassment, and her hands clenched in her skirts. Events had shaken Mirana so deeply that Cadsuane was unsure she would ever recover. Bera, of course, was very nearly unflappable. "Most of us were given a free day because of the rain," Bera replied calmly. A sturdy woman in plain wool, fine and well cut, but decidedly plain. You might have thought her more at home on a farm than in a palace. You might, if you were a fool. Bera had a keen mind, a strong will, and Cadsuane did not believe she ever made the same mistake twice. Like most sisters, she had not entirely gotten over meeting Cadsuane Melaidrin, alive and in the flesh, yet she did not let awe rule her. After only the slightest of deep breaths, she went on. "I cannot understand why you keep coming back, Cadsuane. Clearly you want something from us, but unless you tell us what it is, we cannot help you. We know what you did for the Lord Dragon." She stumbled a little over the title. They still were not quite sure what to call the boy. "But it's obvious you came to Cairhien because of him, and until you tell us why and what you intend, you must understand that you'll find no aid from us." Phaedrin, another green, gave a start at Bera's bold tone, but she was nodding agreement before Bera finished. "You must understand this, too," Mirana added, her serenity regained. "If we decide we must oppose you, we will." Bera's face did not change, but Phaedrin's mouth tightened briefly. Perhaps she disagreed, and perhaps she did not want to reveal too much. Cadsuane favored them with a thin smile. Tell them why and what, if they decided. So far they had managed to stuff themselves into young Althor's saddlebags tied hand and foot, even Bera. Small recommendation for letting them decide so much as what to wear in the morning. "I did not come to see you," she said, "though I suppose Kumira and Daigyan would enjoy a visit since you have a free day. You will excuse me." Motioning Corgaida to lead on, she followed the woman across the entry hall. She only glanced back once. Bera and the others had already gathered up Kumira and Daigyan and were hustling them away, but hardly like welcome guests, more like herded geese. Cadswain smiled. Most sisters are a servant. In that company, Kumira hearted much higher. The most suspicious could not think they were there to try to convince anyone of anything. So Daigyan would pour the tea and sit quietly except when addressed, and apply her excellent mind to everything she heard. Kumira would let everyone except Daigyan speak before her, and sort and file away every word, every gesture and grimace. Vera and the rest would keep their oaths to the boy, of course, that went without saying, but how assiduously was another question. Even Mirana might be unwilling to go too far beyond bare obedience. That was bad enough, yet it left considerable room for them to maneuver, or be maneuvered. Dark-liveried servants hurrying at their tasks along the broad, tapestry-hung hallways darted aside for Cadswain and Corgaida, and the two of them progressed to a flurry of deep bows, curtsies made over baskets and trays and armloads of towels. From the way eyes watched Corgaida, Cadswain suspected the deference was as much for the holder of the keys as for an Aes Sedai. There were a few Aiel about, too, huge men like cold-eyed lions, and women like colder-eyed leopards. Some of those gazes followed her icily enough to bring on the snow threatened by the rain outside, but other Aiel nodded to her gravely, and here and there one of the fierce-eyed women went so far as to smile. She had never claimed to be responsible for saving their Karakarn, but tales become twisted in retelling, and the belief granted her more respect than any other sister, and certainly more freedom of movement around the palace. She wondered how they would feel if they knew that had she had the boy in front of her right then, she would have been hard-pressed to stop herself from blistering his hide for him. Barely more than a week since he nearly got himself killed, and not only had he managed to elude her completely, he had made her task even more difficult, if half what she heard was true. A pity he had not been raised in far Madding. But then that might have led to its own catastrophe. The room Corgaida took her to was comfortably warm, with fires blazing in marble fireplaces at either end of the chamber and lamps lit, mirrored flames in glass towers that chased the day's gloom. Plainly, Corgaida had sent orders ahead to prepare while she was waiting in the entry hall. A serving woman appeared almost as soon as they, with both hot tea and spiced wine on a tray, and small cakes glazed with honey. "Will there be anything else, Aes Sedai?" Corgaida asked, as Cadswain set her sewing basket beside the tray, on a table with edge and legs thickly gilded. Rigidly carved, too, as was the wide cornice, also covered with gilt. Cadswain always felt she was in a golden fish weir when she visited Cairhien. Despite the light and rain dripping outside the narrow window, the sky outside heightened the sensation. "The tea will do nicely," she said. "If you will, tell Alana Mosvani that I want to see her. Tell her without delay." Corgaida's keys jingled as she curtsied, murmuring respectfully that she would find Alana Aes Sedai herself. Her grave expression never altered as she left. Very likely she was examining the request for subtleties. Cadswain preferred to be direct, when possible. She had tripped up any number of clever believed she meant exactly what she said. Opening the lid of her sewing basket, she took out her embroidery hoop, with a less than half-done piece of work wrapped around it. The basket had pockets woven inside to hold items that had nothing to do with sewing. Her ivory hand mirror and hairbrush and comb, a pen case and tightly stoppered ink bottle, a number of things that she had found useful to have at hand over the years, including some that would have surprised anyone with nerve enough to search the basket. Not that she often left it out of her sight. Setting the polished silver thread box carefully on the table, she selected the skeins she needed and sat with her back to the door. The major image on her piece of embroidery was finished, a man's hand clutching the ancient symbol of the Aes Sedai. Cracks ran across the black and white disc, and there was no telling whether the hand was trying to hold it together or crush it. She knew what she intended, but time would tell what was truth. Threading a needle, she set to work on one of the surrounding images, a bright red rose. Roses and Starblaze and Sunburst alternated with daisies and Heartsblush and Snowcap, all separated by bands of stark nettles and long-thorned briars. It would be a disturbing piece when completed. Before she had finished half a petal on the rose, a flash of motion reflected on the flat lid of the thread box caught her eye. It had been carefully placed to reflect the doorway. She did not raise her head from the hoop. Alana stood there glaring at her back. Cadswain continued the slow work of her needle, but she watched that reflection from the corner of her eye.
Hey, Christopher, how you doing? Alrighty, I'm gonna call into his life for tonight. I'm actually a little sore and tired tonight, so I had to call it an early one. I'll be on again tomorrow. Hopefully I feel a little bit better. But I want to thank everyone for stopping by and everyone who keeps stopping by. I appreciate all y'all support. Until next time, everyone, y'all stay safe.